Hello and welcome to the JAGGY THISTLE Podcast. My name's Kenny Farquharson. I'm your host for these wee chats about Scottish politics and Scottish culture. Just if you've come to this as a podcast and you're unfamiliar with what the JAGGY Thistle is, check out the link in the show notes here. Over on the JAGGY Thistle website on Substack, we have long form journalism about Scottish politics and about Scottish culture, essays, criticism, documentary photography, all kinds of stuff that you might be interested in, I hope. Give it a go. You can subscribe for free to get some stuff, and you can pay to get full access to all the archives and all the new stuff as well. So a little advert there for the JAGGY Thistle. Have a look, as I say, link in the show notes. Wee bit of housekeeping as well for the start of this podcast. A big thank you to any listeners who came along to see me at the Edinburgh International Book Festival. Did two events there. The first was a panel discussion with other very good colleagues from the Holyrood Press Corps, talking about the latest news from Holyrood. It was quite to use a word favoured by Donald Dewar back in the old days. It was a bit tousy. There was some leading figures of the gender critical movement in the audience. There was a former leader of the Scottish Labour Party in the audience. There was some very good questioning and very good discussion there about Nicola Sturgeon's biography, about what was going on at Holyrood, about the trans issue. Some quite a good discussion there. So thank you for coming along to that, if you did, and for your participation. The other event was a very well attended, sold out event where I chaired and interviewed Jonathan Freedland, the Guardian columnist. Very interesting man, and we were looking at, if you're looking at this in video, I'm holding up his book, The Traitor's Circle, in which I gave him a bit of a hard time about the lack of an apostrophe in the title, and he defended himself not entirely convincingly, I think. But otherwise, he was a very convincing interviewee, and I'll be writing about his book in a future JAGGY Thistle review. So thank you if you came along to those. There was a lot of people there. I had a good chat afterwards with people like Sarah Brown, the wife of the former Prime Minister. It was good to see her. A few other people there. The solicitor, the Advocate General for Scotland was there. So there was quite a cast of folk who came along to that. So thank you for that. And there will be other opportunities to come along and chat with me in real life at JAGGY Thistle events in the future. But that's the housekeeping over. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about Jeremy Corbyn and his new party, and what are the prospects of Jeremy Corbyn's new party at the Holyrood election next May. And we may be getting ahead of ourselves here, because this party is a little bit of a mess. The launch has not exactly been pain-free. In fact, I'm not entirely sure if it has actually launched yet. Nobody's quite sure. Nobody's quite sure what even to call it. Some people are calling it Your Party, which I think is a bit too much like, kind of the old internet of the 20 years ago, kind of Your Space, My Space, that kind of feel. Slightly better than some of the names that have been suggested that sound more like names for building societies or insurance companies. But I think the name that was suggested to me that might be finding traction is The Left. Very simple, The Left. Although that's a little bit old school for some. So, can they get their act together before the Holyrood election? I think they probably can. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they will. But it will be a little bit skin of the teeth to try and get things together for then. And, when you look at the discussion about Corbyn's party, within the SW1 Westminster bubble, it's naturally focused on the next general election, the next UK general election. There doesn't seem to be, and that's quite understandable, because, Corbyn's party will open up a flank on Labour's left that it's the last thing it needs at the moment when it's fighting Farage on its right. And if Downing Street has come up with an answer to this conundrum as to how you face both ways at once, then I've yet to see it. And I think we're only in the early days of them even beginning to come to terms with Corbyn's new party. But little understanding that within the Westminster bubble, that the first test of Corbyn's party will be as soon as next May here in Scotland, also in Wales. But let's look at I'll be looking at Wales later on this year. I think Wales is very interesting, but just now we're looking at Scotland, and the reason that this is there's the dynamics are different here in Scotland, okay, than they are when you look at the Westminster issue, largely because the SNP, there are people in the SNP who are exactly the kind of person that Jeremy Corbyn is looking for, and from speaking, I've been speaking to a few people about this. Some pals who are well placed in on the left of Scottish politics, both in the SNP and in the Labour Party, and out with the main parties as well. Trying to get a sense of what's going on here and where this is headed, and and I get a strong feeling that the launch of Corbyn's party will cause as many problems for the SNP as it does for the Labour Party. Sure, it's going to cause a headache for Anas Sarwar. It's the last thing he needs, struggling to make an impact against the SNP. But the SNP, I think, has good cause to be concerned about Corbyn's party. So why do I say that? I say that because there's a certain kind of SNP voter, and I think you may know this person. I certainly know a number of these people that fits the exact profile. And let me talk about who I mean. I'm talking about the kind of perhaps the old lefties within the SNP. These are the people who perhaps left the Labour Party to move to the SNP in protest at the Iraq War 20 years ago. It could be those. There are another group who left the Labour Party around about the independence referendum in 2014 in disgust because Labour was cozying up to the Tories in the Better Together movement in the No campaign during the independence referendum, and people found, especially people who were attracted to the independence message, they found this deeply distasteful, and for a lot of them that was the final straw. And there's long been, kind of from 30 years ago right up to more recently with younger people, some people who are instinctively and perhaps culturally from the Labour left, but who have come to the conclusion that the SNP and Scottish independence is the swiftest route to socialism in this country, and that's why they've gravitated towards the nationalist movement. Sometimes with a heavy heart, has to be said, and sometimes not utterly convinced about nationalism as a political force, nor wholly convinced about the SNP as a party to deliver it. But nonetheless, they on balance have seen this as the most effective vehicle to deliver what they want as the primary political aim, which is a more socialist society, or a totally socialist society, depending on who you're speaking to. So I think that group of voters and that group of activists as well are ripe for the plucking by Corbyn's party. And Corbyn knows this. You know, Corbyn understands these people, he feels their pain, and he's pressing their buttons. Corbyn was up last week in Edinburgh to do a thing at the book festival. Was that at the book festival? No, I don't know what he was up for. He was up to do a couple of events. He was going to be on a picket line in Glasgow, and he did something in Edinburgh. Now, I understand there was some chats around this visit, but it wasn't a kind of big planning meeting about how this party, his new party, will work in Scotland. This was just a bit of a flying visit, but there were some chats around the edges of it. And but Corbyn took advantage of this visit to perhaps press the biggest button for the kind of people I'm talking about. And that was to say that he thought that Scotland should have another referendum on Scottish independence if that was the will of the Scottish people. Now, obviously a bit vague as to how a will is expressed and what would be the circumstances of such a vote. But the important thing was that he positioned himself more on the nationalist side of the constitutional argument than on the unionist side. And that is an open sesame to a couple of million Scottish voters. They start to pay attention once you've opened yourself to that possibility of a new vote on independence. Now, I think that's actually regardless of how you might actually vote in such a referendum. I'm not entirely convinced that if Corbyn was Scottish, he'd be a yes voter. But even opening the door to that puts him into the hearts and minds of a couple of million yes supporting Scots. So, having done that, he has it's almost like an entry ticket to Scottish politics. So Corbyn's party have, declared their intent and declared their openness to Scots of either a socialist disposition or a nationalist disposition, which is a lot of the electorate. And I think he believes that he can make an impact in there. And there's plenty of scope for this party. Now, my understanding is that there are at least 40,000 signatures. People have signed up to get more information about this party. 40,000 with Scottish postcodes. That's a remarkable number of people. And they are. I think these people come from different sections of Scottish society and different sections of the Scottish left. It includes those people, like I said, those maybe old school SNP lefties, but it also includes the people who flocked to the Labour Party during the time between 2015 and 2020, when Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party. That strange interregnum, that fever dream, when the whiskery grandpa of Finsbury Park was bidding to be Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The people who were attracted to the Labour at that time and who are still kind of in the Labour fold, despite not being cherished by the current leadership, I think those people might well be attractive attracted to the new party. And also a key group here, and this perhaps is the group that will be impacted most by a Corbyn party in Scotland, and that's the Greens. Now the Greens, there's 10, 12, sometimes 13% of the Scottish vote for the Greens, higher in the cities than it is elsewhere in the country. But there's a real chunk of Scottish support there. But I think it's a soft vote, because it includes people who are what they call watermelon Greens, with green on the outside and red on the inside. And it also includes a group that disparagingly, in the words of a friend of mine, described them as Tories who recycle. And the kind of people who are just a little bit tree huggerish, without in a middle class way, without really embracing the revolutionary socialism aspect of modern green life. So I think the green vote is very soft, and vulnerable in a number of ways, because it's such a mixture of people. And I think that there's certainly a group of people within the Scottish Greens who are not entirely enamoured with what the party's been doing in recent years. The way it's been kind of cozying up to the SNP and, kind of playing with being in government, not in a wholly successful way, it has to be said. And so there's a part of the Green Party and the Green movement that want a rather more of a protest party, a protest type of politics, rather than an engagement with the establishment and engagement with government, which is what the Scottish Greens have been trying to do. And the new leaders of the Scottish Green Party, Ross Greer and Gillian Mackay, I think represent that kind of engagement with government, the potential engagement with government that is a bit of a Marmite issue within the Green Party. Now, I think the Corbyn Party could be very attractive to a big chunk of Green support. I noticed that Professor Sir John Curtis, the guy in the top psephologist of the country, who I've known for a long time. I gave him his first gig in newspaper journalism way back in the early 90s when I was political editor of Scotland on Sunday. Yes, I'm that old. So John is a fantastic psephologist, and I noticed he wrote just a week or so ago. He was doing a commentary on a poll for the group More in Common, and his conclusion was that the Corbyn Party, in UK terms, he wasn't talking about Scotland, but in UK terms, the Corbyn Party could put a real dent in the Green vote. In fact, it could possibly take more votes away from the Greens than it takes away from the Labour Party, perhaps on the basis that most of the committed hard left have already left the Labour Party for various reasons. This party, the Corbyn Party, whatever it's going to be called, let's call it the left. There's a lot of scope for them in the Scottish Parliament elections. How much, I'm not entirely sure. I was at when I was at the book festival recently. I was talking to you about that at the top. I was asked what was my prediction for the Holyrood election, and I just said, look, usually I am daft enough to give a prediction this far out, but there's so much fluidity in the picture, with Reform coming in, with the Tories in free fall, with Labour, still not got its act together on its offering to the voters, still unsure as to where it stands on some of the constitutional questions. The SNP, with half of its cabinet leaving, maybe not half, but quite a few senior cabinet ministers leaving. Actually, that's something I should have mentioned earlier. Another reason for discontent within the SNP, within the left of the SNP, is the current state of the SNP leadership, where you have John Swinney, I think I wrote in a Substack, in a Jaggy Thistle Substack last year, is the most right-wing First Minister in the history of Scottish devolution. His deputy, Kate Forbes, is more socially conservative than many Tories. The party is also stalled on independence. So the state of the SNP is not to the liking of the kind of committed socialists, SNP socialists, who could be attracted to the Corbyn Party. So I think we're now at the stage where there are many questions about where this party stands, and the people who are attracted to it. I'm talking just now about the activists who would have to be, who would have to make the whole thing happen. I'm talking about activists within the SNP and activists within the Labour Party. I think, they have a number of questions in their mind which, for their own personal reasons, they're wrestling with and need an answer to, and they include how much autonomy would the Scottish end of this party enjoy in Holyrood? How much could it act as a Scottish party on its own terms, with its own policies and its own decision-making process? And linked to that is how much would it be possible to insulate the Scottish party from what I think is going to be a total bun fight on the left in London, where the various entryists and competing factions, Tankies and SWP, and the familiar People's Front of Judea type of ructions, which are, I think, inevitable in this party, but can perhaps be escaped in Scotland. How much can the Scottish operation of this party be insulated from what I think is going to be, a dog's breakfast south of the border? I think that's the key thing. Another question is this new party really going to be able to marry the two forces which are going to be attracted to the Corbyn project? And by that I mean the kind of working class trade unionists who are committed socialists in Scotland on one side, and on the other side the kind of your middle class university students, university lecturers who populate the left in Scotland. And it's a class. I've been listening to a very good podcast about the Labour leaders since the Second World War. I'm sure you can find it on the usual platforms. And one thing that's really striking about it is how the same dynamics affect every single Labour leader, and that's between the kind of working class, slightly more right wing, slightly more practically minded, union influenced workers part of the Labour movement, which had its roots in the trade union movement, let's not forget, and the more cerebral, intellectual, middle class, Oxbridge PPE, Gatescallite, socially Gatescallite people within the party who are the university intellectuals. There's always been that dynamic, and it kind of crosses it crosses the left-right line a number of times in Labour history. Gateskill probably wasn't a great example to mention there, but you know what I mean. It's that kind of the tension between the Fabians and the TGWU. They represent two different types of two different forces, two different motivations. Two different kind of headspaces within the Labour movement, and can those two be married within the Corbynite party? And I'm not entirely sure that they can. The other question I think is on people's minds is who's going to lead this party? I think the same question is actually relevant for Corbyn's party, for Farage's party. Corbyn and Farage are big personalities, they're quite charismatic figures and their parties are very much based around them, and so do they have Scottish avatars that can kind of replicate that their politics and their and project the same kind of same kind of personality? Where's the Scottish Farage? Where's the 19th hole, hail fellow, well met, pint in the pub equivalent of Nigel Farage? And where is the kind of Scottish equivalent of the whiskery Jeremy Corbyn? Or is the Scottish side of the Corbyn party represented by a different kind of politician, a different kind of socialist? Maybe it's somebody who comes more from a trade union background. I have a couple of names at the back of my mind, but I won't destroy their careers by mentioning them on here. But there are people within the Labour movement in Scotland who have, I think, the charisma, who have the track record, and I think they have the appeal to lead this party quite successfully on its own terms, to whatever degree of success it's possible for it. And at this stage, I still think we don't really know. Bottom line, to answer the question that I didn't answer at the book festival, how will this pan out? What will the Holyrood election bring for the Corbyn party? And I really don't know. I think, like I said, there's scope for it, there's possibility for it, but I think it's too early to tell exactly how well it will do, if it does well at all. But I think what it will do, it's going to diminish support for both Scottish Labour and the SNP. It's going to bring them further down at a time when reform is on the rise. And I think that can only be good for Nigel Farage and his party. So the sound you can hear, other than, you probably heard in the background a few minutes ago, the Edinburgh bin men choosing this moment to empty the bins outside my study window here in Edinburgh. Apologies for that background noise, but the sound you can hear, other than that, if you listen, is the sound of the MP for Clacton having the last laugh, because he will benefit more than anybody else from the rise of a Corbyn party in Scotland. So that's my take on that. I think we will no doubt return to this subject between now and next May. It's a fascinating, fast-moving, dynamic, flowing situation as we head up to the Holyrood election. I'm going to have a kind of a big launch of the Jaggy Thistle's election coverage at some point in the next couple of months. I think that we need to kind of bring a few things together and make that work, and try and make this the place where you get some of your best insights into what's going on in Scottish politics as we head to that election. A kind of a real watershed election, I think. But more of that in future. In the meantime, thanks very much for listening to the end. You are a soldier. Much appreciated. Very grateful. We'll see you soon. Cheers.